Good morning, and welcome to another edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio here on Westfield Community Programming, Channel 15, 89.5 FM WSKB, and our media partners, Southwick Community Programming and Agawa Media. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach, and today in Artsbeat, we start our program with Hartford-based playwright Jacques Lamar. You may be familiar with some of Jacques Lamar's work. He's written part of the very funny Christmas on the Rocks at TheaterWorks in Hartford. He wrote a play called Raging Skillet, which had its world premiere at TheaterWorks a couple of seasons ago, and a play I loved, I lost, I made spaghetti, and now the sequel to that, Secondo, will have its premiere at TheaterWorks later on this season. So Jacques, you're a busy guy, and it's always great to see you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And especially because I have what's called a face for radio.
You are the resident funny man in Hartford. So first of all, let's talk about Secondo, which is having its world premiere at TheaterWorks during the summer.
Yes, yes. I'm having a kind of a crazy summer. I have 3, maybe 4 shows going up, so I can talk a bit about each of them. But Secondo is very exciting because I've never written a sequel to something that I've written before. And 10 years ago, TheaterWorks in Hartford needed to do a programming change, and they said we need something fun, we need something that's going to bring audiences in. And I had already gotten permission to adapt this woman, Julia Malucci's book, which is called I Loved, I Lost, I Made Spaghetti. And when I read the book, I was like, I could see it. Did you see the show? I can't remember.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. I could see in my mind as it reviews her bad relationships with bad boyfriends and her use of good food to kind of lure men, keep men, and then console herself after she loses men. And so I could see each of these boyfriends being a course in a dinner over the course of an evening. And so, in over the 2 hours, she would be telling these stories, but also making an antipasto, making a salad, and most impressive, making pasta from scratch on stage, putting it through the pasta crank, turning it into spaghetti, making sauce, and serving wine, antipasto salad, and fresh made spaghetti to her guests on stage as the audience watches. And so 10 years later, Rob Ruggiero, who's the artistic director of TheaterWorks and the person who directed the original production, said, we'd like to revisit her for the 10th anniversary of the show. And it's also the real life Julia's 10th anniversary of her marriage. And so it was an interesting challenge to tackle writing this play because there's no book this time to follow. And so I took an apartment with Julia for a weekend and I grilled her about how she met the man who would become her husband, about their engagement, about their marriage, about what makes marriage complicated. And it gave us a chance to revisit a boyfriend who I did not use from the book in the first play, because I just felt like it was one boyfriend too many. And just by chance, that boyfriend came back and started sniffing around after she got married and trying to sort of tempt her into having an affair. So that kind of was a bit of kismet. So this time the plan is, and we're still working things out through the script, she is going to be preparing her 10th anniversary dinner. And we're invited over because she's having agita about this 10th anniversary dinner, knowing that this guy has resurfaced in her life. And she's going to be making an appetizer. She's going to be making risotto on stage, and she's going to be making a dessert because her husband's on his way home from being abroad. So it's going to be fun. This one's, I think, going to be a little more emotionally complex too.
How will people get it when they see it if they haven't seen the first part?
Yeah, it really requires no knowledge of the first part. I mean, she basically does away with the first part in a paragraph saying, "I wrote this book about my bad boyfriends, and I started on this new chapter when I met my husband." So all you really need to know is it took a while for her to find Mr. Right, and then it becomes complicated.
And you have the same actress who appeared in the first production coming back to reprise the role in the second one.
Yes, Antoinette Lavecchia is an amazing, amazing actor, and she was Rob's first choice right from the get-go. She had already done previous production or two at Theater Works, and he, knew that she would be just right for the part. And she's not coming on stage and doing an imitation of Julia. She's really created her own character, and she's very involved in the artistic process. Especially because she brings that female viewpoint to it, and she has such affection for the character. And after she did it in Hartford, she did Spaghetti in Cincinnati, in Sarasota, and she did it in in New Jersey, New Jersey. So, and since then, her star has only grown. She had a recurring role on the reboot of what was that show with Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser?
Mad About You.
Yeah, she did the reboot of Mad About You. She had a recurring character as an Italian American chef, and she appeared at Hartford Stage in Wilderness, and so she's excited to come back and inhabit this part again and get behind the stove. It's a high wire act for an actor. A solo show is always a high wire act for an actor. But
Oh
when
yeah.
you actually have to, mind food, at the same time that you're making from scratch, it's a challenge, And she rose to the occasion last year, and I have no doubt, or last time, and I have no doubt she's going to do the same thing.
A question. You wrote a play, Raging Skillet, which was another play about woman and food. What's the thing with writing plays about food? A lot of your plays have a food scene or actual preparation of food. And I loved Raging Skillet, particularly the recipes that were handed out in the playbill.
Yes.
Her catering is some of the most offbeat type of catering around, but I took a couple of them home.
Oh, and did you make them?
Well, we had over the course of that summer, we had a 16-year-old that was hanging out with us a lot who really liked the chocolate potato chip hors d'oeuvre. That became memorable in the kitchen.
Yeah, no, what had happened was I had Rob's like, we need another show like Spaghetti, which I thought meant, we need another show that involves food. And I love food. I love food. Take one look at me. And so I was trying to figure out what that was going to be. And I was at Book Expo in New York, and I smelled bacon in the middle of a book event. And I'm like, where's the bacon? And I went over, and there was a table set up in front of the Feminist Press, and Chef Rossi was there signing and talking up copies of her book. As it was not yet released, it was coming out, and the book was called The Raging Skillet, memoir of a punk rock chef. And the way it works at Book Expo is you get in line, someone hands you a book, and then when you get up to the author, they, sign. Some will chat with you, some won't. And I got to Chef Rossi by the time I had read just the jacket copy, and I was like, hey, would you like to see this turn into a play? And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. Gives me your business card. She said later, she told me she just thought I was insane. you know, that I was a crazy person. And 6 years later, it's reversed, and I know that she's the crazy person. But you know, I wanted to do something different, and that one was a 3-person show as opposed to a 1-person show. The cooking is a little bit more incidental to the action in that play. It's really about her relationship with her mother. And that show has gone on to have 4 or 5 other productions, and there's discussions about possibly bringing it into New York. So I'm excited about the future for that show as well.
And of course, you've got 2 pieces in Christmas on the Rocks. Have your I want to call them playlets or
Yeah.
skits. Have they been part of Christmas on the Rocks from the get-go, or were they added in as the show repeats year after year?
From the get-go, I had my version of Charlie Brown in the show, which is the finale of the show, and it's a very sweet, I think, funny kind of close to a very kind of bonkers evening of theater. And then at a certain point, Rob wanted to start shifting things around, try other characters that we didn't get to do. And for people who've never seen the show, and this year I think is the 10th year, it takes place in a bar on Christmas Eve, and these characters that you knew and loved in your youth from Christmas movies and specials, you know, who were children are now grown up. And in some way, Christmas has let them down, and they're in a bar on Christmas Eve. And so it's kind of a sequence of these things. And so one of the characters he wanted to do from the get-go, and he really wanted David Lindsay-Abaire to write a piece for Zuzu Bailey, George Bailey's daughter, in It's a Wonderful Life. And she is an iconic child character from a Christmas tradition. But unfortunately for her, or you know, I would say the one thing that's kind of interesting, she's really not the centerpiece of that film. She's a little kind of emotional moment. So there was a lot
Yeah.
of room to kind of play. But so Rob reapproached me after David wasn't able to do it, and a few years went by, and said I'd really like to do Zuzu. So I'm the only playwright who has 2 pieces in the show. And I really had fun writing the Zuzu piece because I made her racked with anxiety, which is something that I live with. And so had a great time playing with that.
And you've also written most of the material for Varla Jean Merman, both for video and for live shows, which is a complete 360 from writing a play for the stage, or is it?
It's very, very different. It's a whole different process. And I do want to say that most of the material in a Varla Jean Merman show is written by Jeffrey, who I know you'll be speaking with. And I write material for him, and he edits it and turns it into something that works for him. Sometimes it doesn't work, and it gets, you know, it gets tossed out. He'll do the same thing with his own work. So it's been a collaboration. I would say when people see the shows, the Varla Jean Merman shows, and I think this year might be our 18th show working together. Every year we write a new one. I would say about 80% of the material is Jeffrey's. He's really a comic genius, and I am very, very lucky to have been a fan who has had the opportunity to work with one of their comedy idols. And so every year we try to come up with some sort of loose theme to kind of tie everything together. Theater Works on June 11th is going to be presenting 2 performances of Varla's show from last summer that we wrote that she's been touring, called Little Prick. And it's about vaccinations. Who knew a year later we'd still be sweating vaccinations? I guess it's good for business. But it's a very fun show, and it's going to be the final time that she's performed that show. So, and in the midst of her touring that show, we start working on the next one. And the next one's going to open up in Provincetown in mid-June, like a week later. and that one's called Varla Jean Merman's Ready to Blow, and it's about something that Varla Jean and I both deal with, and that's anxiety. And so kind of about our mental health after the past several years. I don't even want to say the past 2 years with the pandemic. Stretches further back, I think, for most of us.
Jacques, we should take a quick break to acknowledge our underwriters, but before we do, Secondo and Varla Jean Merman's Little Prick both run at Theater Works in downtown Hartford. If you want dates, times, information, and purchase tickets, visit their website at twhartford.org. You're either listening to Artsbeat on 89.5 FM WSKB or Agawam Media or Southwick Community Programming, or you're watching us on Westfield Community Programming Channel 15 or YouTube. Peter Coles is our chief engineer, engineering today from Southern Florida, and I'm Mark Auerbach, your host, and I'm hosting from my living room. Jacques Lamar is chiming in from Hartford, and we'll all be back after a couple of underwriting announcements, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by Bay State Noble Hospital, a brand new name for a Westfield institution which is improving the health of our community every day with quality and compassion. Noble Hospital and Bay State Health, better together.
Hi, this is Harry Rock, host of Rock on Westfield every fourth Wednesday at 8 a.m. Tune in for my view of this place I call home.
Community Radio
89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. If you've missed a part of today's programming, or you want to watch it again or share it with friends, it's archived along with all the other Artsbeats on YouTube at WSKB Community Radio. Our guest this first half hour is Jacques Lamar, the playwright, who in his day job promotes and publicizes all kinds of arts events through the company Buzz Engine in Hartford. Jacques, what are some of the things you're working on besides your own plays?
Well, I'm working on spreading the word about Hartford Stage's show that is now running called Kiss My Aztec, which is a new musical comedy that is co-written by John Leguizamo. It's a show that has been developed out in California, and it is going to be headed to Broadway. And so this is a really amazing chance for people in Connecticut and Western Massachusetts to see this show before it moves to New York and starts playing at New York prices. So it's a very fun, look at Latin American history, very irreverent, and it brings in all kinds of different musical genres from gospel to hip hop and, of course, Latin music. So I think people are going to have a really, really great time. They've got a killer cast. So
I looked at the reviews of it in California, and people talk about it being as in the reviews that I saw, the Book of Mormon was mentioned quite a bit. So this has to be an outrageously funny show.
Oh yeah, it's totally irreverent. And how could you not have that when you've got John Leguizamo involved? So I think people are in for an absolute treat with that.
We should tell people, get tickets for that early on at hartfordstage.org. And this is the third musical in recent times at Hartford Stage that had New York aspirations. Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder started at Hartford Stage and moved on to Broadway and won the Tony Award for Best Musical. A couple of years later, Anastasia premiered at Hartford Stage, and that went on to a nice run on Broadway and a tour. So hopefully this one repeats that success level.
Yeah, and I don't know what's happening with Flamingo Kid. That's another show that I think had some aspirations that helped round out Darko Tresniak's tenure. So this is very much in keeping with Hartford Stage's impact on national and international theater. So it's very exciting for our community, especially because Hartford itself, the city itself, is majority Latinx. And so I think it's really something special to for the community, which is very important, I think, to Amelia Ben-Susan, who is not only the artistic director, but is also Latina herself. So I think this is a win-win for everybody.
Definitely so.
I'm also working with the Bushnell on publicizing this little show that's coming to town called Hamilton. It's been in Hartford before, and I know a lot of people couldn't get a ticket, and or maybe you've seen it on Disney Plus, but there's nothing like experiencing the show live. And to quote a song, if you want to be in the room where it happens, it starts June 22nd at the Bushnell, and that's really a special theatrical experience. It's really, really quite incredible. And I've got 2 other shows of my own that are coming up this summer.
Since you mentioned Hamilton, we should say you're doing 2 other shows at the Bushnell. One is Emoji Land, which runs next week.
We actually found out Emoji Land's not coming. So,
oh my gosh.
So that I just found out yesterday. So we can take that off our collective calendars, at least for now.
And then the Bushnell generally doesn't do Broadway tryouts or previews, but they've got a play coming in the summer at the end of July.
Yes. When Playwrights Kill is a brand new show by Matthew Lombardo, who wrote Tea at 5, which premiered at Hartford Stage, and High, which premiered at TheaterWorks. He also wrote Looped, which went to Broadway and scored a Tony nomination for Valerie Harper. He brought that to the Bushnell as well. He's returning to the Bushnell for the 3rd time, but the first time with a brand new play. And he has an amazing, amazing cast, which includes Tony nominee Jeremy Jordan and Tony Award winner Harriet Harris and Tony Award winner Andre DeShields from Hadestown. And that's going to run for 2 weeks starting at the end of July. And again, it's something that they're hoping to bring into the city. So if people want to see it here first and certainly save a bit of money over New York prices, tickets are on sale now at the Bushnell and or bushnell.org. Again, it's called When Playwrights Kill, and it's a backstage comedy about a playwright who's worried that the woman who has been cast in his show is going to destroy his play and his reputation. So steps must be taken.
And of course, people around here are going to know Harriet Harris because she's done so many plays in musicals in the last few years, either at Berkshire Theater Group or Barrington Stage. So she's a well-known face in our area, and she's pretty adept at musical and a really fabulous comedian.
Oh, good. Well, and I'd love to have her on your show if that's possible.
Well, we'll see about that.
I'm doing my job on the air now.
Of course. So what are some of the plays that you're working on right now?
So I have a show. You're the first person I've talked about this. It's going to be opening in Waterbury, Connecticut at the Seven Angels Theater in mid-August. I want to say around August 10th, called Italian Mom Loves You. And it's very odd because I've written 3 Italian American comedies and I'm not Italian in the slightest, but I did live in Italy for a year and a half and I have an incredible love for Italian culture and Italian people. And but Italian Americans are a little bit of a different breed too, you know, and it's a very fun show based on a character created by Daniel Francese, who is an actor who most people would know as Damien from Mean Girls. He was Lindsay Lohan's gay friend Damien in Mean Girls. And he was on HBO's show Looking, and he's done work on stage, and he's a stand-up comic. And he created this character of Antoinette, the Italian mom. And he created her as a viral thing on YouTube. And across YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, she has millions of views. And I reached out to him because we have friends in common. And I said, I think you're a genius in this thing you created. And if you'd ever like to turn her into a stage character, I would love to work with you on it. And he wrote back once he got out of Facebook jail, and said, I have been wanting to do this. I just needed someone to do it with, and here you are. And so I basically took his character, the situations she kind of places herself in, other kind of characters that he created in her universe. And we've come up with this solo show that's being directed by Michael Shirali, who directed I Loved, I Lost, I Made Spaghetti for Half Moon Theater. And he's directed, I would say, probably at least 20 of Varla Jean Merman's shows. So Michael and I know each other for many years. And he's Italian-American from Brooklyn. Danny's Italian-American from Brooklyn. Even though Daniel's going to be, in a dress playing an Italian woman, it's not a drag show. He's fully committed to this character that he's created. It's based on his mother. And I think anyone who either is Italian-American or loves Italian-Americans or loves their mom is going to think this show is a lot of fun. So it's called Italian Mom Loves You. And it's going to be at Seven Angels Theater in Waterbury, and people will be able to learn more at Seven Angels Theater, spelled with an RE.org. And then the last project that, it's supposed to happen this summer. Waiting to hear if it's final. I can't say where it's going to be. But years ago, I was approached by a producer named Ryan Rattel, who I had worked with when I was on the board of Hartford Children's Theater. And he asked me if I would create a new version of Alice in Wonderland, but with drag queens. And so we did a reading of Alice in Dragland with Varla and Ginger Minge, who is a RuPaul girl, and Jackie Cox, who's a RuPaul girl. We did a Zoom reading just to see how it went. It was very funny, too long, cut a bunch of stuff. And then they did a reading of it in New York that went apparently very well. And so we're looking to try and do an out-of-town tryout with the hopes of bringing Alice in Dragland to New York City. So all signs point to something happening this summer. I can't say when and where, but I could have 4 shows running simultaneously. And for any playwright after the past 2 years, when theater, ground to a halt and kind of, started to come back, that's an absolute blessing. I consider myself the luckiest person working in theater today.
Well, that puts you on a certain level, because I think the playwright Neil Simon at one point had 4 shows running simultaneously on Broadway, and Stephen Sondheim had 4 musicals running simultaneously on Broadway. So now there's Jacques Lamar, but the shows are not on Broadway.
No, thank you for reminding me. And the thing is, I say to myself, who is the Neil Simon of today? There are certain people who are very consistent playwrights and work gets done and whatnot, but who is kind of aiming to be that kind of entertaining, smart, but funny middle ground kind of playwright? I remember one of the first reviews that I got for I Loved, I Lost, I Made Spaghetti when it was in New Jersey. It was the New York Times, and the first line was, "Well, it's not Long Day's Journey into Night." And I'm like, I applauded the critic for knowing that's what I wasn't going for. But basically he said, you have to admire a play that aims for the middle and surpasses it. And so it's like, I think that being, a child of Neil Simon or a Ken Ludwig or whatever is something we need more of these days. I think there's so much drive to, put on plays that are really smart and have something to say and take on urgent topics. And there's certainly a place for all of those things. But I know that there are a lot of people who want to go and be entertained, be moved, laugh. And that's really what I'm aiming for right now. So if I could only be Neil Simon, I would be delighted.
Well, Jacques, we're out of time, but before we run along, we want people to know that Jacques' new play, Secondo, will be premiering at TheaterWorks in Hartford this summer, twhartford.org. His collaboration with Varla Jean Merman, Little Prick, runs at TheaterWorks Hartford, again, twhartford.org. We're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more Artsbeat. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. I'm Mark Auerbach. Don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
It's Tuesday morning from 6 till 8. Wow, it's Tuesday with Bob Plass.
Community Radio 89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat TV and Radio, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer. You are either watching us on Westfield Community Programming, Channel 15, Southwick Community Programming, or Agawam Media, or listening to us on 89.5 FM WSKB. Jacques Lamar, who was here for our first half hour, is back at the beginning of this half hour with Jeffrey Roberson, who is the creator of Varla Jean Merman, who is a singer and actor. Varla Jean Merman has created a lot of shows with Jacques. The most recent one is called Little Prick, and it heads to TheaterWorks next weekend for a benefit, twhartford.org. As Varla Jean Merman, Jeffrey Roberson has appeared in the National Company of Chicago, a variety of films, live shows, and just a consummate musical theater performer and actor. And Jeffrey, it's great to have the chance to meet you, and welcome to Artsbeat.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I know that you created this character of Varla Jean Merman. How did that come to be?
You know, I went to college at LSU in Baton Rouge, Louisiana State University, and really all we did was drink. But I met these guys in the music department, because I was in the music department at the time, and they had given me Ethel Merman's autobiography. And so I read the autobiography, and there's a whole page. It says of Ethel Merman's autobiography. It says my marriage to Ernest Borgnine, and you turn the page and it's blank. And so they were married actually for 38 days. And so I thought, oh, wow, what if they would have had a baby, and that she would have hated it so much, she would have shipped it off to an orphanage in Louisiana. And that's sort of where Varla was born, just having that lineage, or at least believing that's what she was, And that's how I started the character. But then I started to do drag. There was a talent contest in Baton Rouge at a bar. And this guy I used to know named Vid Kid Timo, we would do live performance and videos, and we created this little story, this little 15-minute play with live performance and video switching in and out. And that's sort of how it all began.
Did you have any idea at the time that the character would emerge as not only a drag star, but do musical theater on Broadway and do annual shows co-written with Jacques Lamar that traveled the country?
Yeah, well, no, I never really even dreamed that I would do drag for a living. I mean, I just didn't even think, at that time, it didn't even seem possible. I mean, this is before RuPaul and before RuPaul's first incarnation, with the Supermodel album. So I didn't even think it was possible. So just to start making money and to work. And I moved to New York City and to be in advertising. And I worked in a big advertising firm for Conan Belding and Ogilvy and Mather. But then I started doing drag on the side because there was such a great, amazing drag scene in the early 90s in New York City. And that's what RuPaul came out of. And I started performing. And so, and some of the videos that I had done with the guy in New Orleans, they were playing in New York City. And so I told some guy at a bar that was me, and he didn't believe me, blah, blah. But then I did a benefit for a March on Washington, which was, way back in 1993. And that's how I sort of got booked all over the city. And it just sort of happened from there.
But you've done the videos that are popular, and you can find all of them on YouTube. And every year it seems create a new show, but you've also had time to do other kinds of theater, like The Mystery of Irma Vep, which played at
Oh,
Longworth and Hartford Stage and
yes.
Chicago. So,
Well, it's funny. A
as
lot of people don't really trust, drag queens, I guess, to act, at least at the time, back then. But, this is back, Michael Wilson, who was at Hartford Stage at the time, was so wonderful to cast me in a play. And I had done a lot of drag theater, but it was my first sort of, very legitimate thing after Chicago. And Chicago was a drag part. So I was very lucky that I just happened to have the voice for that. And I got into that. And I toured with that for a little while. I did a little on Broadway, but to start doing parts that weren't necessarily cast as drag, I started getting cast in. So that was amazing.
Which of these shows, not your own shows, but the shows that you've done, like Chicago or Irma Vep, and I know that you've done some other work as well, which of them are high points that you personally are glad you've done?
I loved Irma Vep because I had never really done a lot of character work before. And that was just quick changes in characters. And that was one of my most happy experiences on stage. Another thing I did a show called Phantom of the Oprah with a playwright in Boston named Ryan Landry, which was just a true highlight. And Mildred Fierce, which was based on the Joan Crawford, Mildred Pierce. And I have to say, the one thing I'm really most proud of that I would never, ever, ever do again. I did the opera The Medium and by Menotti, and I sang it seriously. And I can't believe sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night having panic attacks over it because it was so difficult and so hard. And I don't know if I quite succeeded at it, but I'm glad when I was young that I was stupid enough to try to sing an operatic role, not really being an opera singer. And that was very difficult because I sang as a, mezzo, with real opera singers like sopranos and, real singers. And I had to be angry in falsetto, which doesn't really quite go together, anger and falsetto. And, but I'm glad that I did it, but I would never, ever do that again. But it was a highlight that I thought, I can't believe I had the balls to do that,
How do you protect your voice? I've seen your performances in P-Town and touring in Hartford and Northampton. You actually sing when you do a performance, and you speak as Varla Jean Merman. That must take a toll on your voice. How do you protect it?
Well, I have to say, you don't really know any older falsettists. Falsettoist, it sort of has a shelf life. And so now I sing everything in the key of B, Arthur. It's all much lower. I mean, my voice has definitely dropped. Once I turned like 45, my voice, I just got lower and lower and lower and lower. I'm like Joni Mitchell. I mean, it's just, got lower and lower. But then, people came to see me for the comedy most of all. So, at least I have been able to hold on to that gift. But my voice definitely has gotten much lower over the years, much lower.
Yeah. So how did you, Jacques and Jeffrey, how did you two collaborate? How did that come to be?
Well, Jacques was working as marketing director at Hartford Stage, and he had already sort of known my work. And when I came there, he gave me a copy of a book, a Patrick Dennis book called Little Me. And it was one of my most favorite books of all time. And I just, someone who I used to work with before, had given me a copy of Little Me. So it was just like, wow, God has, sort of delivered me someone else that has the same sort of sensibilities that I have, and even crazier than me. I mean, which was a godsend, because sometimes I'll write something and it just needs to be punched up. It needs to be made funnier. And Jacques is amazing at doing that, and has been ever since I met him. I mean, he's always been funny. I'm not really funny off stage. Jacques is funny every minute.
I
know that.
I had been to, the first time I experienced Varla was at Wigstock in New York. And I don't know if you've ever been to Wigstock, Mark, but I mean, it is hours upon hours, and each queen only gets like a number or two on stage. So you really have to make an impact very quickly. And Jeffrey was so memorable. I think that may have been when you did Schoolhouse Rock.
Oh, yeah.
And he was, just so clever and funny and had such a well thought out character. It's not just like a man in a dress who's talking the way they would whether or not they're in a dress. And so I ended up seeing a show that he did, I think it was at the West Beth, called Jingle Bells with Lady Bunny and Sherry Vine. And again, just, really, really kind of astounded me, and saw him in tweed fractured classics, Pig in a Hot Tin Trough, and then started seeing him up in Provincetown. And so when he came to Hartford Stage, I was a huge fan. And so I actually didn't want to talk to him because I was intimidated. I later learned that there are many reasons not to talk to Jeffrey. But I had thought he was very aloof. But what's interesting about Jeffrey and Varla is, there are two sides to the same coin. And I think Varla gives Jeffrey permission to do a lot of stuff that Jeffrey wouldn't do. And so I had thought that Jeffrey was standoffish, but he's actually quite shy when he's not in character. He doesn't want to be the center of attention. Even when he comes right off stage, there's a certain kind of, reserve, where I think he puts it all on stage. And when that character is on stage, she wants that attention. She's thirsty for it. And off stage, Jeffrey's just thirsty.
Yes.
Well, in terms of both of your collaboration, you have a Little Prick comes to TheaterWorks next week, and that is your most recent show. But you're going to launch a brand new one in Provincetown the following week. How long does it take you to create a new act?
Some take longer than others, and some, there's always that deadline. So I always know what the deadline is, and sometimes it just doesn't come. But this year, came a little later. Last Little Prick came right away. I had songs written in January for it. This year was a little later, like March. I started getting it together. But, the last 2 years were sort of easier because, COVID, everybody had the same experiences. And what makes something funny to someone when they have a shared experience with the other audience members? So everyone has a shared experience with COVID. So it was like shooting fish in a barrel. It was just, there were so many easy, funny things to do. And other years, things that, written like right before we're on stage. This year's kind of in between. It's, not the most prepared, but it's not the least either. And this year's show's got Ready to Blow, and it's all about anxiety, just because I know Jacques has had some anxiety issues. I have. And then I started to see so many people after COVID have some sort of anxiety issues. There's so much anxiety in our country. And so I decided to sort of delve into why I was having this anxiety and how to deal with it. So, because I did have some anxiety attacks this last year, and, I have a great life. A wonderful, great life. And I was like, what is going on that I'm feeling this anxiety? And so just to explore that, because, let's face it, a lot of people in the world have it much worse. And, we're so lucky in a way, but still anxiety is anxiety, and people have to deal with it. And sort of the brain processes things whether you want to or not. So it's been, and Jacques has had anxiety a lot longer than I, and I've always heard it, but when I've had it, I was like, wait a minute, this is real. Like, I don't think I really realized how much anxiety can really affect your day-to-day life and activities, especially if you have an anxiety or panic attack. And I never really believed in them until karma got me real good.
Years of my complaining about it meant didn't mean anything until it happened to him.
Even so much as before, this past year when Simone Biles was in the Olympics, and I quite didn't understand it. I was just like, suck it up, girl, come on. Well, now I totally get it. And I feel that I was sort of taught a lesson. Do you know what I mean? And I'm glad that I was, because I'm much more sensitive to that. If you haven't experienced it, it's sometimes hard to understand because you don't know what it is. And when you have it, you know what it is.
Exactly. We're going to take a quick break to acknowledge the underwriters that make Artsbeat possible. We're talking with Jacques Lamar, the Hartford-based playwright and publicist, and Jeffrey Roberson, who created and acts the character of Varla Jean Merman in theaters and clubs across the country. Varla Jean Merman appears at TheaterWorks in Hartford on June 11th. For tickets for that, twhartford.org. And if you go to YouTube, you can click in Varla Jean Merman, you'll find a whole host of very funny sketches, songs, videos, and all of that good stuff. Peter Coles is our chief engineer this morning. I'm Mark Auerbach, and we'll return after these messages, so don't go away.
Support for the community programming of WSKB is provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Wednesday mornings start off right from 6 to 8 a.m. with Tina Gorman and Wake Up Wednesday.
Community Radio 89.5 WSKB.
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 89.5 FM WSKB Westfield.
Welcome back to Artsbeat, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Auerbach. Peter Coles is our chief engineer today. If you've missed a part of today's program, you want to watch it again or share it with friends, you'll find it on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio's YouTube page. My guest today, Jacques Lamar, the local playwright and funny man and PR guru, and Jeffrey Roberson, who created and performs the role of Varla Jean Merman in theaters all over the country. As Varla Jean Merman, he'll be performing in his show Little Prick at TheaterWorks in Hartford on June 11th. For tickets, twhartford.org. There are 2 performances that day, and it's great to have both of you here on Artsbeat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeffrey, what's Little Prick about?
Well, it really was response. It began. We wrote it originally to in response to, oh wow, it's over. Let's celebrate. And what happened, because that was actually last summer, where, as you recall, everyone felt that it was over. And then when the vaccine, I mean, it worked, but it did not prevent you from getting it. And of course, the biggest outbreak in the country was in Provincetown. It began sort of there, where people realized, oh, wow, we have to be careful. You know, we still have to wear masks. It's not over. And so we had written the show to be like, even the opening number, what?
The show and Delta variant premiered around the same time.
Yes, they did. We even had the opening number. I came out like as Hannibal Lecter, and then, you know, it was like, and the song was Let's Go Crazy, the Prince song, saying it's done, and now we can do whatever we want. Well, it was about 2 weeks into the run, and suddenly everyone was wearing masks again. The show was permanently outside again. And so we had to sort of change the whole thing. And the original show, which we've gone back to a little bit now, was, you know, some people have a little bit of post-traumatic stress disorder about going back into life. People are they were scared. And that's still kind of going on now. And it's really, but, you know, there's always Omicron and monkeypox. So the show, the show really has spread like the virus. It keeps working because of just, you know, what's going on in the world. So, and it's very funny. And there's songs about, you know, having dealt with what has happened, and, you know, the fact that a lot of people did not want to get vaccinated. And I talk about that, and just about, you know, having to be close to an audience again and do meet and greets and all of that when Varla is actually terrified. You know, I mean, I remember years ago I saw Kristen Chenoweth, and this is way before the pandemic. I saw her and she did a meet and greet, and she had on black woolen mittens in the middle of the summer in Provincetown because she did not want germs. And I totally understand it. But at the time I was like, wow, that's kind of severe. But now I get it. You know, she's one little person that has to greet 600 people, you know, so, you know, she's the common denominator. We deal with all of that. And there's, you know, just, I mean, there's some dark humor in this as well, just because, I mean, let's face it, COVID is not funny, but we have to laugh at it. We have to laugh at it.
Yeah. Sean.
You know, 2 years ago, you know, the world shut down in March. And we just thought, you know, we weren't even going to write a show for that summer. for, because usually the show will premiere up in Provincetown late June, early July. And, everyone was in lockdown, and the lockdown kept extending. And so we, was it, Jeffrey, 3 weeks before the show was set to premiere, we're like, there's going to be a show. And we wrote the show Super Spreader in 3 weeks. Jeffrey got it written and staged, costumes, everything. And he was among the first to go back and perform, not just in Provincetown, but anywhere.
Yeah, there was no one else performing. And it was outside. Provincetown was allowing outside. And, so we were very lucky to perform, but we had like 3 weeks notice. And so that's where the Super Spreader show came from. And funny enough, I was doing this thing because it was outside next to the pool. So I would jump into the pool. And I had 2 sets of breasts. I had one set of silicones that are very heavy. And then I had these light ones that I'd use and jump in the pool so they wouldn't, get damaged in the pool. Well, in Massachusetts, people were having house parties, and they suddenly said there's no more than 50 people allowed at any outdoor gathering. So then we thought, oh no, that's not enough to make money. We have to do 2 shows a night. So I have to jump in the pool 2 times a night. So
the first and hair and everything.
Yeah, and I was singing Under the Sea. It was a very funny song. So then I decided, well, I'll just wear the heavy breasts in the first show, and I'll wear the light breasts in the second show. Well, I jump in the pool with the heavy breasts on at the end, and I remember just sitting at the bottom of the pool thinking, why am I sitting at the bottom of the pool? They were so heavy. They're 26 pounds. I had to literally fight for my life. Even the staff was like, what's going on? She's not coming up. I came up, I'm choking water. I mean, it was, but it was a lot of fun because I could do the pool. My makeup actually looked better after I got out of the pool. It was blended nicer. But we would just put the costumes in the spin cycle, and I was ready to go 30 minutes later after the first show.
How long does it take you to make up for the shows?
I like to have an hour and a half to put on the costume and do everything. But, I can do it in as little as 20 minutes, and it takes years off your life. One time I was in San Francisco, and I was in the hotel, and it was the show was in the ballroom, and my assistant calls me at 6:30, says, where are you? And I'm like, I'm going to be there. I'll be there because the show was at 8. I was a little behind. At 6:50, he calls me. The show's at 7, don't you? Like 15 minutes. I mean, I hadn't even shaved. I was shaking. I mean, I don't even know what was on my face by the end. But I did the show. But it really, I swear to God, it took like about 8 years off my life.
I just wanted to, the reason I brought up the Super Spreader story was, and I think this just says so much about Jeffrey, is that he could have just stayed home that summer, but he knew that Varla, being part of people's Provincetown experience for this year now 25 years, like that he kind of had to do it. He wasn't going to make the kind of money performing to much smaller audiences outside. And the New York Times did a cover story on Provincetown and on Jeffrey because of him being such a trooper. So I just wanted to kind of pat Jeffrey on the back for, no, seriously.
It was fun. I'm glad we did it. It was fun. It was a weird summer, but I look at it as being a great summer.
And then
I remember reading about that in the Times, that about your, being able to perform outdoors, because all of the arts here were shut down except for 2 theaters that moved their shows outside. And the fact that you were able to give people a good experience in P-Town during a bad time is just remarkable.
Yeah, it was one. I have to open the door. My dog is going to break the door down. I'm so sorry. Hold on.
So, Jacques, while Jeff brings the dog in, let's go over.
He just came home from the groomer, so he's like obsessed to come in here, and I'm like, he's gonna break the door down. He's like 20 pounds. Sorry, look, he's with his monkey. Here he is. He's in the show too.
What's the dog's name?
He's in the show. He works every night. We have a ballet plan this year for him, so he's been working on it since. He's more rehearsed than I am. It's the sad part.
Will he tour with you in all of your shows next year?
Yes, he'll come along. It's actually really good because, I do a whole thing about emotional support albums and animals. And so there's a section on him.
And does he have a big contract rider? Does he get fed at certain times? And
yes. Well, he's very demanding, but he does come out dressed as Annie at the very end of the show. So I haven't never put a wig on him. So that's my next task. I ordered one. You can find anything on Amazon. I ordered a baby Annie wig. I love Amazon.
Do you worry that the dog may get more acclaim than you and end up with his own show?
I know a development deal, and I'll be. I mean, he's really good, but we'll see. I can always cut it. The song goes, and the kid goes with it.
Well, guys, we're out of time, and I want to thank both of you for joining me. Jacques Lamar, our area playwright, who's got a show premiering at TheaterWorks this summer.
Jacques is busy.
And Roberson, who is the alter ego of Varla Merman, who's doing the show Little Prick at TheaterWorks in Hartford on June 11th. Get information on both of those at twhartford.org. Thank you both, gentlemen, for joining me. It's been great.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll see you this summer in Provincetown.
Great. And see you in Hartford next week.
Okay, thank you. And that wraps up another edition of Artsbeat TV and Radio. Peter Coles has been our chief engineer. If you missed a part of today's programming, you can catch it again on YouTube under WSKB Community Radio. We'll see you next Friday with another edition of Artsbeat.